Hi, welcome back to Genesis Custom Sabers. And for a long time I've wanted some kind of cool lighting above my main door in my shop. So as a maker, I finally broke down and made my own. And I patterned these after the interior lights in the Millennium Falcon. They're not a direct replica, they're probably pretty close and maybe scaled down slightly. I needed them to fit and also have clearance when the door opens so it doesn't shear them off. Inside are pixel strips, WS2812B, I believe, which were leftovers from NeoPixel blades that I've made. So I have all these little scraps that I can tie together. And of course I've got this Chinese cheap controller that allows me to change the color, to do some really cool different color effects. And if you're a Falcon aficionado, you'll know that in different films, the interior lights sometimes have different color. In A New Hope, they're green. In Empire Strikes Back, they're white, off-white, and then kind of like a greenish white in The Force Awakens. And of course, I've got all kinds of little animations and things that you can do with these if you want to play around with it. But I usually like to just leave them on the green. But, you know, just however I feel. Whatever I feel for the day, I can set my mood with my interior lighting. Of course, mine are also not inset in the wall. They're built onto a PVC hub, stand out from the wall, and I have some conduit run. But really, the method that I'm going to show you, you could use either way. Okay, here are my parts, prepped, primed, and painted. Both of these I 3D modeled. This is 3D printed from Shapeways in their PA12 nylon. Light does not go through this material, which is why I chose it. A little less detail than the fine detail, but it's also much more durable. And I've already dropped one of them. If that had been the fine detail, it would have shattered. Of course, if you got your own 3D printer, or if you want to do some from Shapeways, you can download the 3D models for these two parts. They're available for free on my website. Of course, the work that goes into modeling them, I'm offering for free because they are somewhat replicas of Star Wars parts. I don't sell replicas, but any donation that you would offer on the website would be welcome for the work of 3D modeling these, so you could print your own. Of course, this was laser cut on just hardboard, 1/8 inch hardboard. You could, of course, laser cut this if you have a laser cutter, or you could 3D print both parts, and they're designed to go together. And what I'm going to do with these holes are actually made for 440 screws. So I'm going to quickly, oops, tap those. Okay, those holes are now tapped for 440 screws, and I've got these tiny little 440 socket head screws that the holes are such that when the screws are inserted, they will be almost flush. Of course, you could round it out a little bit if you want yours to be flush. So I'm just going to line them up. There. It's ready to go, ready to be weathered. I want to point out too that my designs are just eyeballed from high-res images from the films, from the Millennium Falcon set, and I expect that they're probably a little smaller than the actual prop, but they're designed to go over the 4-inch PVC hub in order to create a cohesive light unit. So you have to keep in mind that these are not a dead replica. I tried to make this bell as close as I can, thinking that's probably a heat sink. I also want to point out that the finish I've got on this, I didn't seal the 3D printed part. I just lightly sanded it to get it nice and even, and then I used a stainless steel spray paint. So the result was I wanted a texture so that the part looked like it was cast metal, as opposed to a nice polished pristine machined part. The original parts, to me, look like cast metal. So that's what I was going for. Okay, I just solved a huge headache with the wiring. I wired it all up for the distance that I'm going to be traveling to each pixel strip, and it wasn't working. And through trial and error, I discovered that the 14 gauge is great for the power, but it was too much for the data line, so it messed with the resistance. So I had to run a really thin 28 gauge for the green data line to each after the fact. Just a little bit of extra wire, but it's working now, and it's doing what I want. Okay, there's a couple of ways to treat this split loom, and I'm going to need a bunch of it for this. So I've cut a length of what I need, and I'm going to turn it from this into this. Now, one of the ways people do that is using a product called Rub and Buff, which is really great for things, but you would need a lot of it for this, and it would end up being really expensive. So there's a cheaper way. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use just the cheapest silver spray paint that I have left over. It's not my good stuff. And I'm just going to spray a bunch of it onto a cloth and then find an end and basically just rub the spray paint into the split loom, and it coats on the outside, not too much, and it gives it kind of a silvery sheen. Spray a bunch more. If you spray it right on, it'll get into the black cracks, and then you would have to weather it. Whereas this, you can quickly do this whole thing, and it'll look really nice when I'm done. And after 5 minutes, I've got this. Yeah. I use these 4-inch PVC hubs as a backing or to build the light. Essentially, it's just a cap that goes on a 4-inch PVC pipe. Get them at the hardware store, $1.50. I used my design parts as a template, and of course I had to drill and tap for 632 threaded screws. I mount these on a wall. You could also mount them inside the wall. Okay, one of the last things I'm going to be doing here before I seal these things up with the diffusion, I've decided to go with this, it's like a corrugated, I don't know if you can see it there, it's like a corrugated plastic that really diffuses light well. It's semi-transparent. That's what I'm going to be using. I tried a bunch of different things, including this foam and paper, but the corrugated stuff works best. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to build a reflector in the middle. This is entirely optional. It's negligible. It hardly makes any difference at all in terms of the light. But what I want to do is I want to produce more light that reflects on the kind of the rim where the openings are going to be. So again, this is optional. It's just one of the little details. Here at Genesis Custom Savers, it's the little things. So what I did is I cut out this foam and I kind of beveled the edges as I'm cutting it, so it almost makes a bit of a dome shape. And then I covered it with 2 layers of this reflective tape. And so what I'm going to do is just basically pinch the edges down to kind of make my dome. And then I trim off the excess just to give me about 1/4 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch around the outside. It don't have to be, so nobody's going to see this, so you don't have to have nice clean lines or anything. And there's my dome. And then I basically just drop that in, center it, and then pinch it down. I covered up my screw holes, but this metal film is really nice. I can just take a screwdriver and just open up my screw holes again. And what this will do is this will, when it's plugged in, basically reflect the light, and it's going to bounce off this and up into the diffuser. And I think it creates just a little bit more illumination. And I want to kind of max out my lights, maximum efficiency. So I'm going to do that to all of them. Just one more quick tip, just as you're installing these. I'm very conscious of where the top is and where the bottom is, and I want things to be perfectly straight, and I want each of my lights to be perfectly straight. And I've already got screw holes drilled in. So in order to keep this straight, there's a little trick. I'm just going to use a caliper, and I'm just going to, I don't know if you can see my screw holes here and here. I want to make sure that my cord comes out in the same place. I'm going to go just approximately, and I'll lock that in. I'm going to rest it in my screw hole, and I'm going to make a scratch mark right on the bottom there. Then I'm going to go to the other screw hole, put that in there, I'm going to make another scratch. And basically equidistant between those 2 scratches, I'm going to put a mark, and that's going to line up with that mark, and I'm going to put a little torpedo level, so that line is basically straight up and down. And I can install each of my lights exactly straight up and down. Once I have the parts ready, it's time for installation. After careful measuring and always plugging in and testing things as I go, basically I'm just doing a test fit of everything to make sure everything's going to work the way I expect. Make sure everything clears the door the way I expect. And so far, so good. Everything looks great. Okay, one of the final steps is to apply some weathering so I can turn this into this. That's going to be my final look. And you can use a black wash for this. I'm actually using a water-based black gel stain. And the reason is it this is a very porous prop. And if you use a black wash like an acrylic, sometimes it dries so fast that you don't have a time to actually wipe it off and get the effect that you want. So with this, I mean, I'm not going to do it right now on camera, but I can do the whole, take the time to do the whole prop into every crack and crevice. And then I can use, for this type of weathering, I'm going to use a microfiber cloth and then just wipe it out of the porous surfaces as much as possible, and it just sticks in the grooves beautifully and gives me the finished effect that I'm looking for. Weathering is key. I already had this wall prop with a couple of lights, so I decided to revisit how I attached it to the wall, and I used it to disguise my power supply for the whole thing. So the wires are run through the conduit and it looks in universe, more or less. So I hope that you like my lighting project and it might be something that's perfect for you. The 3D files are available on my website for free if you've got access to a 3D printer or a laser cutter or something like that. It might be a project that you can use to upgrade your space. Your space. So thanks again for following along with my little project. Please subscribe to my channel and click that little bell thing if you'd like to get notified when I post new videos. Thanks again for watching.